Very much for being here today. We're going to start off with the interview session now. So without further ado, I'll go into my first question. Thank you, by the way, for the brilliant initial talk. I really recommend everybody to listen to that. First of all, I'd like to talk about, since we're on the topic of a little bit about dunya and how we might want to refrain from getting attached. Often we do tend to get attached to many different things, from our spouse, to our parents, to our children, even our homes. So what would you recommend for us? Because sometimes things don't go as expected. We can get hurt by these attachments that we form. We fall, we get lost, and sometimes we might lose our sense of purpose. One may ask, is it wrong to make the attachments in the first place? From your own experiences and knowledge, could you share with us how we can overcome this and rise above?
Okay, Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So this is actually a really deep question, and it's one that I've spent at least a decade trying to ask and answer, and then ask and answer and ask and answer. And the reason for that is we all, as human beings, we love and we get attached, and it's just part of our nature. It's part of the journey of through this life. And some of us, and everybody has different types of attachments. And so me personally, anyone who's read my book knows that, I write about this in the book, that me personally, I was always, since I was younger, I would get very, very attached to people. And that was kind of my main attachment, more than cars or jewelry or something, but just people. And so I think I've always struggled with this question of how do we do it in a healthy way, really, you know? And I think that it's a process, and it's something that I'm still going through in terms of learning, and our entire journey through this life is a learning process, really. But what I found is that everything in life should be a balance, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything with a balance. And what I believe is that Allah and His Messenger, this deen, has taught us how to love in a healthy way. And the problem is that when we love in an unhealthy way. And how do we love in a healthy way is something that will really save us a lot of heartache and hardship. But just realizing that Allah gives us gifts in life, and among those gifts are our spouse and our children and our money and our health, our youth, our beauty, our power. All these things are gifts. So the important thing is to take them as gifts, to be grateful for them. Everything that you're given is also a test. Every gift is also a test. And part of the test is showing gratitude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Then if you are grateful, I will give you more. So one of the best things we can do if we want more and we want to protect our gifts is to show gratitude. The fastest way to lose a gift is to be ungrateful.
Sometimes we might also have a difficult situation in our lives which makes us mentally and physically drained. Sometimes we work very hard for something which all ends up going wrong. And I know you spoke very much about focusing on the positives in your life and being grateful. But sometimes the hardships can make someone lose their character, their behavior, their temperament, and other things. So also, you get some people who might start questioning their faith. They might say, why me? So what would you recommend for people to overcome also the hardships that they face? And what's the purpose of these hardships?
Okay, so that's a big question, and I have to answer it in a small way. So here's what I'll do. I'll give you two things. One is that there's a statement of the Prophet ﷺ that if we always remember the statement, it really has a very transformative effect on our lives and how we respond to hardship. And that is the statement. He says, عَجَبٌ لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ أَمْرُهُ كُلُّ خَيْرٍ. That the matter of a believer is strange. Everything is good for him or her. Everything is good for a believer. And this is only the case for a believer. Do you know how powerful that is? What that means is that, people ask this question, why do bad things happen to good people, right? People ask this question, and people struggle with this question. But what this hadith is telling us is that bad things never happen to good people. That's actually what this hadith is teaching us. What that means is that everything that happens to a believer is actually good. Can you imagine that? That everything that happens is actually good. But it really has to do with how we respond and how we perceive. So when you deal with your hardships, always remember that a matter of a believer is strange. Everything is good for you. But it all has to do with how we respond. Now, how should we respond? As we're told, the believer is between patience and gratitude. When the believer, as the hadith says, that if you have something that you don't want or something that's difficult, you are patient and so it will be good for you. And if you have something that you desire, something that you want, and you are grateful, it will be good for you. So every matter, whether it is good, whether it is difficult, or it is ease, will be good for you, depending on your response. The second thing I'm going to say, that a very, very powerful tool in dealing with hardship is something called husn al-dhann billah. Husn al-dhann billah. What that means is always having a good opinion of Allah. So no matter what happens, whether you understand Allah's wisdom or you don't, whether you know what's happening or you don't, whether you agree or you don't, whether you wanted it or you didn't, you always continue to have a good opinion of Allah. And you always know that whatever Allah does for you is actually for your own good. And that it's actually better for you. One analogy I give to explain this is that if you imagine going outside right now and having your mother pick you up, and she starts driving, and you have no idea where she's taking you, right? So you're in the back seat, your mom's driving, and you don't know where you're going. And you ask her, where are we going? And she says, you'll see, just trust me. My question to you is, will you be afraid? Will you be sitting in the back panicking? Will you be terrified and anxious? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. No. And there's only one reason why. Why is it? Because you trust your mom. Because you trust your mom and you have something called husn al-dhann with your mom. Meaning, you know your mom has your best interests in mind. You know your mom's not going to take you to a ditch and leave you there. Yeah? She's not going to take you and harm you. That whatever she's doing with you, wherever she's taking you, whether or not you understand or whether or not you know what it is, you still have full trust that she will not harm you. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And that's what gives you peace. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has more mercy for us than your mother has for you, than any mother has for her child. So when Allah is taking us somewhere, when Allah is doing something in our lives, even when we don't understand it, we should have that good opinion and that trust in Allah that He will only do what's best for us. So that's what husn al-dhann is.
Jazakallah khair. That was a lovely analogy about trusting your mom, and obviously Allah has so much more love for us than our mothers. As we were speaking about false attachments and hardships, it means that we should be more trusting in Allah more than anything else. And you have a few chapters in your book, Reclaim Your Heart, and it's on the topic of relying on God. Can you briefly define what having true reliance on Allah is?
So, reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or tawakkul, I spoke about it in the talk a bit, but I think that actually the analogy or the story of Musa alayhi salam in front of the Red Sea is such a beautiful explanation of what tawakkul is. Because he's in a situation where he doesn't know the way out. That's the other thing. See, it's easy to be relaxed if you know the plan. You know what I mean? Oh no, it's okay, we're good because XYZ is going to happen, or 1, 2, 3 is going to happen. But it's when you have no idea, right? You're completely in the dark, and you completely have no... In fact, the situation doesn't look like there's any way out. You know what I mean? Like you look, in fact, completely stuck. And it's in that situation where your trust is tested. That's when tawakkul is tested. Because you don't know. Musa a.s. didn't know how he would be saved from that situation, and yet he had complete reliance. قَالَ كَلَّا إِنَّ مَعِيَ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ. He knew that he would not be overtaken, and he knew that his Lord would get him through, even when he didn't know how. Even when he didn't know how. That's very important for you and I to understand. Tawakkul by its very nature means that I trust Allah whether I know or I don't know. Seen or unseen. You know what I mean? That's the whole concept of tawakkul. And that's why I go back to the example of the mother, right? And Allah is high above any analogy. When you think about your mother, you're trusting her because even though you don't know where you're going. You don't have any idea where you're going, but you're still trusting her. That's trust. That's tawakkul.
I'm just going to go on a little bit about this day and age, and it appears as though sometimes we're constantly being pushed in life to be more efficient, more productive, and almost striving for worldly ideals that we all cannot possibly even reach. Particularly, the modern way of life focuses on fulfilling dreams and attaining happiness through those. And often it's perceived to be materialistic items that lead to success and happiness. So how should one live in this dunya to achieve a balance? Does religion advocate seeking in the next world only? Or can we desire to benefit in this world and prosper as well?
That's a great question. So the thing about so there is this hadith that I feel like just summarizes this concept so beautifully. And it's a hadith that talks about two different worldviews, or what is called akbaru hamma, primary concern, primary ultimate focus. Okay, so what the hadith says is that a person who makes this life their primary concern, what that means is that your ultimate motivation in everything that you do, your ultimate and most primary focus is dunya, is this life, and what you're going to get from this life. That when a person does that, there's a consequence to that. And one of the consequences to that is that the person's matters actually become scattered. And that's very interesting when you think about that concept, because the terminology is فَرَّقَ اللَّهُ لَهُ أَمْرًا, that their matters become scattered. And poverty is put between his eyes. These are all very powerful analogies. What does it mean to have poverty between your eyes? Like, think about if I had something hanging right now between my eyes, like I had a quarter hanging there or something. What would I see if I looked this way? The quarter. What would I see if I looked this way? The quarter. What would I see if I looked that way? The quarter. You feel me? When you have something hanging between your eyes, it's all you see. No matter where you turn, and no matter what your situation, you look up, you see it, you look down, you see it, you look left, you see it, you look right, you see it. When poverty is stuck between your eyes, it's all you see. Make sense? That feeling of poverty, that no matter how much you have, it is never enough. No matter how much you have, you always want and need more. The inability to have contentment, the inability to just be content, is what it means to have poverty stuck between your eyes. You know this attitude, like you were saying? If you have something, no, you want more, right? You got a new car, but now you got to upgrade. You got the new phone, but wait, when's the new upgrade? It's always like you're never actually satisfied. You never actually find enough. You never have enough. And you always feel poor, no matter how rich you are. No matter how much you have of dunya, you still feel poor. That's what it means to have poverty between your eyes. And that is a consequence of making this life your primary concern. Is that in fact, this life will never be enough for you. It will never satisfy you, and it will never fill you. You'll always be wanting more. Does that make sense? And your matters become scattered. And you know when you think about, sometimes you go through points in your life where everything seems like it's falling apart? You know, you're trying to fix one aspect of your life and then 50 other aspects are falling apart, right? You're trying to please this person, but then this person's displeased, and you just feel like you just feel like scattered, right? It's such a powerful way of describing that state. That's also a consequence of having the wrong focus. It's very deep. But something very interesting is that on the other hand, the Prophet ﷺ says that when you have the hereafter as your primary concern, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you are ignoring this life. See, that's where we find that balance. When we talk about primary concern, it means that my ultimate concern is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that doesn't mean that I don't care about my family, or I don't care about my career, I don't care about my education, I don't care about being the best that I can in whatever I'm doing in this life. That's part of the process. Like, as believers, we're supposed to be striving for excellence. Not perfection, excellence, ihsan. Ihsan is to strive. So we, even in our roles in this life, we should be striving. But our ultimate concern is the hereafter. And when a person does that, the Prophet ﷺ says that one of the things that happens is that person, Allah joins their affairs. Jama'allahu lahu amra. Allah takes care of their affairs and puts contentment in the heart. You see, the opposite of that poverty between the eyes is contentment in the heart. Contentment only really comes when you have the right concern. And then last thing I'm going to say is this. If you're striving only for this life, you actually lose both this life and the next. You actually don't even get this life. That's the amazing thing about dunya. Is it's like, I think Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, it's kind of like your shadow, right? If you chase it, you're never going to reach it. The more you run after it, the more it goes away from you when it comes to chasing this life. But it's when you actually run after akhirah, like if you're making the hereafter your primary concern, well, the amazing thing is you get both this life and the next. It's not even a choice. When you make dunya number one, when you make hereafter number one, you get both hereafter and dunya. That's what's amazing about it.
You spoke about a content heart. Now I'm going to touch upon broken hearts. Sometimes people have had moments in their lives where they felt that they put a lot of expectation and trust in somebody. Maybe they poured out their heart to somebody, a close family member or even colleagues, and then they get disappointed with the reaction and the result. So how do we heal a broken heart?
I wouldn't know anything about that. Okay, so how do you heal a broken heart? Okay. So the thing is about healing in general, when you think about healing emotionally, think about healing physically. How do you heal physically? So first, if I get a gunshot wound, all right? Na'udhu billah. If I get a gunshot wound, what's going to happen if I just say, you know what, let me just put a Band-Aid on it, I'm fine, everything's fine, let me just forget about it. I'm not going to treat it, it's fine, nothing really happened. And I try to kind of just cover it up, pretend it's not there, and just sort of go into denial mode. What's going to happen to my wound? Well, question for you, is it going to just go away? No. And it gets worse. You know when people say time heals all wounds? That's a lie. That's actually untrue. Can I tell you why? Because what about my gunshot wound? Why isn't time healing it? Actually, time's infecting it. And it's going to have to get amputated. That's what time's doing to it. But why? Because I didn't treat it. You see? I didn't take care of it. I didn't do what was necessary for it to then heal. Make sense? There's a process that you have to go through with physical wounds, right? There's a process, any doctor knows this. There's a process you have to go through with physical wounds to clean it out, to then cover it up, to protect it from infection, right? And then after you've treated it, then time will heal that wound. But if you haven't treated it, time is not going to heal that wound. In fact, it's just going to get infected. Does that make sense? So with emotional wounds, it's the same thing. This whole conceal, don't feel, be the perfect girl you always have to be. It took a while. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And believe me, So many people are told exactly what Elsa was told. Is that it's a culture. It's a culture. It's a culture like put on your happy face, right? Fake it. If you're depressed or you're sad or you're broken or I don't care what, but just put on your happy face. Because everyone only wants to see your happy face, right? Nobody wants to see any of that stuff, so just put on your happy face. And the idea here is that if you just cover it up, it'll be fine. But that doesn't work with a gunshot wound, does it? So the idea here is that you do have to treat it. You do have to address it emotionally. And once you address it and you treat it, then you can genuinely move on and then you can actually heal. But healing doesn't happen through denial, trust me. Healing does not happen through suppression. Healing does not happen by covering it up and pretending that it's not there, any more than the gunshot wound's going to heal that way, okay? And actually when people go that route of conceal, don't feel, right? What they've actually done is they have stunted the healing process. They're actually slowing and pausing the healing process. They're stopping it, and they are only making it worse. How then do you treat a wound? How then do you treat a wound? Well, emotionally, how you treat the wound is you gotta get into it. You have to get into it, and you have to be real and acknowledge. And one of the fastest ways to heal, and I'm just going to tell you guys spiritually, of course, seeking help is part of our routine. It's okay to go and seek, especially when you need to seek professional help. There's nothing wrong with that. Essentially what we have to realize is Allah uses people to help us sometimes. He uses tools. And, for example, like reclaim your heart. But anyways, that was a joke. But basically Allah uses tools, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's healing. And Allah is the one who is rectifying, but sometimes He uses tools. So it's okay to seek help, professional help, counseling, whatever. And in fact, in some cases, you need that. You need that. But what you do spiritually is that you turn to Allah, you be real with Allah, a lot of crying and a lot of asking for help, asking for healing. Salah, and a lot of time, especially tahajjud. Tahajjud, the thing about tahajjud is the prayer before Fajr in the last third of the night. The thing about tahajjud, dua in tahajjud, crying in tahajjud, praying in tahajjud, is that it really speeds up your healing. It's like accelerating the healing. If you want to heal fast, if you want to really accelerate healing, invest in tahajjud. And that's just just try it. You don't even have to take my word for it. But really, if you want to heal quickly, then invest in the time of tahajjud. And obviously your other prayers, but especially tahajjud will help you a lot in that healing process. But you got to get in and you got to be real. And you got to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal you. Ask Allah to take away the pain. Ask Allah, go through it. And then over time, and subhanAllah, it really does heal quicker that way.
How can one practically develop a relationship with their creator? I'm glad you mentioned the tahajjud, because I think that's one very key practical point. Are there any other day-to-day recommendations for strengthening and maintaining our relationship with our creator?
Yes, glad you asked that, because there are day-to-day things that we can do to strengthen our relationship. Tahajjud is huge. Our salah is a given. As I mentioned in the lecture, salah is like oxygen. It's your lifeboat. It's what's keeping you alive in this ocean. But other things we can do day to day are adhkar. The supplications that you do daily are absolutely essential in keeping your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strong. And the more that you supplicate, the more that you remember Allah, the stronger you are. So go back to the physical example. You see, the physical body is created by? Not a hard question, guys. Allah. Excellent. The physical body is designed by? Allah. Good. The spiritual self is created and designed by? Allah. Exactly. Same creator. You see? So there's similarities. There's parallels. Now, for the physical body, for the physical body, in order to keep the physical body healthy. If I ask anyone in this room, how do you keep the physical body healthy? Everyone will know the answer. Well, Yasmin, you gotta eat properly, you gotta hydrate yourself, you gotta keep it clean, you gotta protect it, right? And you gotta oxygenate it. Now, what if I say, okay, I don't want to just stay alive, but I want to be super healthy? Now, what are you gonna tell me? What? Did this person say gin or gym? Gym. I am in the UK. Okay, gym, right? G-Y-M, right? Not J-I-N-N. Okay. Gym, yes, go to the gym. That's right. You screamed out gin. I was like, okay. So, gym, yes, go to the gym, right? Yes, go to the gym. What else? If you wanna be super duper healthy, now not only are you gonna be eating, but you're gonna be eating like organic, raw, all the whole raw diet, and then you're gonna be taking vitamins and minerals, right? So that extra vitamins and minerals is gonna make you stronger physically, and it may make you healthier, correct? So it's the same thing spiritually. We have our essentials to stay alive. You need oxygen, right? That's your salah. Like your 5 fara'id, your 5 fard are oxygen. If you cut it off, you die. We're not talking healthy, not healthy. We're talking about life and death. You understand me? Life and death. You cut off the salah, you've cut off your oxygen supply. Simple as that. The Prophet ﷺ said the first thing you're asked about on the Day of Judgment is your salah. And if a person has their salah in order, they'll be successful. And if they don't, they'll have failed. Simple as that. That's your oxygen supply. But once you have oxygen and you have food, now you want to be even stronger, you introduce vitamins, minerals, and healthier organic food. Now, the vitamins and minerals spiritually are your adhkar. The more that you say of your supplications, the Prophet ﷺ has a supplication for every action in life. Have you ever picked up the book Fortress of a Muslim? Or look through one of those apps for dua? There's a dua for everything, right? There's a dua for entering the house, for leaving the house, for starting to eat, for finishing eating, for entering the bathroom, for leaving the bathroom, for putting on new clothes, for driving, you understand? There's a dua for everything. Even intimacy, there's a dua. There's a dua to teach you that it's basically to train you to always have your heart with Allah even while you're in dunya. That's the goal. Is to have your heart with Allah, remembering Him, looking present with Allah, even while you're doing dunya things. Imagine even before intimacy, even before eating, even before going to the bathroom, you're remembering Allah. That's how we strengthen ourselves more spiritually. So that's extremely important throughout the day. Learn and say, even if you don't memorize them, have an app that has dua on it, and open it up after Fajr and read your morning du'as, your morning adhkar. And after Asr, open it again and read your evening adhkar. Before you sleep, read it. Those 3, by the way, morning, evening, and sleep, are the most essential. The most essential. And then, of course, having connection to Quran. This is literally like what you're doing, like going to the gym, and the vitamins. That's strengthening yourself spiritually and your connection to Allah.
Jazakallah khair. I need to ask you if there's a dua for interviewing. You can tell me later.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني.
Oh, that's brilliant. Before we move on then to ask our lovely audience for some questions, you wrote Reclaim Your Heart, which has benefited people around the world. Today, people will be able to buy the book, and if you haven't seen it already, it's on the table outside. It's £20, and it is the second edition. Could you please inform us on how it's different to your first edition?
So the difference is that the second edition actually has 4 new chapters. And the chapters that I've added in the second edition, there's 2 chapters on tawakkul, speaking of. And then there's a chapter called The Search for Love. And there's another chapter called, or Seeking God, I believe. So there's 4 new chapters, and also the design internally. It's just it's a lot more consistent internally in terms of the design as well.
And will you be doing a book signing today?
Yes.
So we will have a book signing session at the end. Can I also ask you what made you write the book? Could you tell us a bit more of your inspiration and how you started and how you thought about writing?
One word: life. No, that's really true, though. The book wasn't something I sat down and said, I'm writing a book. In fact, the book is a collection of my work over a decade of my life. And so what it is it's really very much my own personal journey and realizations. And what I was learning along the way. That's what a lot of people, I think, have told me that they related to the book. The reason I believe people relate to the book is because I am living those things. I'm not like, oh, I heard a lecture today, I read a book, let me write it and reclaim your heart. It wasn't like that. It was like, I'm going through it. I'm physically walking, sometimes crawling, you know what I mean? Through it. And then I'm writing along the way. Reclaim your heart. I mean, honestly, I wrote it with blood, sweat, and tears. Like, it wasn't just something easy to write. And it was alongside of everything I wrote was a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff that I was living through. And some of it was very painful. And it was just what I learned. And then how I got through those things, what I learned from them, and then how I got back up, really. So it's really very personal. Reclaim Your Heart is very, very personal. A lot had to happen for that book to happen. I guess I'll just put it that way.
Okay, so it'll be worth reading it to actually relate to your journey. Okay, we should get some questions now from our audience. We will be taking some paper written down questions as well, so we should be able to hand them from the front if you see volunteers. But at the moment I'll start with, so I saw...
Consider making a stage play or film about Reclaim Your Heart.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, would you consider making a stage play or a movie about Reclaim Your Heart?
So a stage play or a movie?
Why don't you write it? Yeah, that's true. Talk to me after. I'm open. I don't know. Allahu Alam. Honestly, I feel like Reclaim Your Heart wrote itself. So, Allah Ta'ala Alam. Like I said, I'll tell you a secret. Well, it's not really a secret because this is going online, but it's still a secret. When I was writing chapter 1 of that book, which is called Why Do People Have to Leave Each Other? That chapter is like the most personal thing probably I've ever written, okay? And I'm sitting there at a coffee shop typing it, and I'm saying to myself, oh my God, what am I writing? Like, I'm literally saying to myself, I can't believe I'm putting these things into words, just because it was so deep in me and it was so personal. But, you know, subhanAllah, of all that I've written, it's that chapter that most people came back to me and said, I felt like you were reading my mind. And it's just because I was putting down what was in me that a lot of people feel but don't say. So yeah, that's it.
Question number 2, I think you had a hand up there.
I've read your book in pieces. I savour it. I have to read it, and it helps me. And one of the things you do so well, Mr. Mashallah, is you reframe things and you explain things in a way that maybe I've not thought about them before. And there's one thing that I need help with understanding. When you talk about our lives, and I feel very privileged and blessed. I live in the UK. I was born and brought up here. I'm Christian. By faith. I've lots of blessings in my life. I feel like I'm in a real position of privilege. When you talk about things going wrong in the world, we have to look at ourselves internally to understand why those things are going wrong. Where I struggle and where I hope you're going to help me be brave is when I see children suffering. When I see what's going on in Calais, when I see what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Gaza, and even not in the Muslim world, because we're all together and I see children suffering. How do you reframe that?
Bismillah. So I'll repeat her question for those who didn't hear it. she was asking, she said she read Reclaim Your Heart, and one of the things that struck her is how it reframes certain things. And she asked the question of, one thing that she struggles with is that here we are, a lot of us, we live a life that's very privileged. Alhamdulillah, we're safe, our children are safe, we have what we need, and more. But one thing that's hard, and she's asking, how do we reframe, how do we understand when we see children suffering around the world, etc.? And when I look at that question, I honestly have to, I mean, it's very personal. I think it's personal for all of us. We all have children in our lives, and, you know, obviously this is just a human thing. But one thing that I would say is that what I have to do is kind of step back and look at the bigger picture. Because one of the things about, for example, if you're on a mountain, you're not going to really be able to see the mountain when you're on it. But it's only when you step back onto the plain that you can see the whole mountain. So one of the things that has to happen in life is to really step back and just kind of look at the bigger picture. And the way that I understand the bigger picture is in this way. This entire life, no matter how long you live, longest you can live, say you live 100, 120 years, okay, I don't even know. Even if you lived 120 years in this life, and you compare that 120 years to infinity, even that 120 years becomes like nothing. Literally like the blink of an eye, like a dream. And the closest analogy that that I've seen or read or heard of is the analogy of a dream. Because you see, everyone in this room has had nightmares, right? At some point in your life, you've had a really bad dream. Has it happened? Yes. And it may have felt really, really frightening, traumatizing, and very, very real, right? When you're in the dream. But then you wake up and you look back at the dream, and even though in the dream, it felt like it was very long and it felt forever, right? Like it just felt like your whole reality. But does anyone know how long a dream lasts? A few seconds. A few seconds. In comparison to your life, which is many years. And so we sort of put the dream into context. Does that make sense? And so why I'm saying that is that no matter how much I suffered in my dream, in the bigger picture, in the bigger picture, it becomes not as big because it was so short compared to the rest of my life. Now, in the bigger picture of our existence, this life is so short in the timeline of our existence. As we know, believers, we will live forever. We will live forever in the hereafter. So our existence is actually, this is just a very small part of that timeline. And that forever is either in bliss or in torment. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. There's a hadith that says that there will come on the Day of Judgment a person who only suffered, who only went through hardship. And that person will be taken and will be just dipped in paradise, just one dip in paradise. And then that person will be asked, did you ever feel pain? Did you ever suffer? And the person will say, I have never suffered. I have never felt pain. And another person who in this life only had pleasure, only had ease, and will have one dip in hellfire and will be asked, did you ever feel pleasure? And they will say, I never felt pleasure. So you understand the perspective. And that's really how I understand it. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay. Next question. Is it possible for people to go to the mic so that everybody can hear? Okay, yes. Do you mind going to the mic? Thank you. Or just, yeah, it's coming to you. Look at that. That's amazing.
I'm here today for my own personal learning, but I also work for a charity that supports women that are going through any kind of violence, and girls as well. So I'm a young people's advocate. And I've got two sisters I'm currently working with, and they're from a Muslim background. And they come from an abusive home situation where there's a lot of talk about honour-based violence, and we're trying to put safety measures obviously in place for them because they're saying that the dad might harm them in some way because they're not as strict Muslims as they want them to be. And what I want to kind of say is, I mean, knowing these girls, they are practicing, you know, but I think dad has another idea of how strict Muslims should be. And what they're kind of saying, because you talked about, like, you know, the emotional wounds and things like that. So it's, I'm kind of trying to tell them, you know, trust in Allah and things like that, because we can relate to that, because obviously I'm Muslim as well. But I think at this moment of time, they're just really struggling, and because they're quite young as well, they don't kind of understand how. So what can I say to these girls as well? Because as much as I'm telling them, you know, trust in Allah, things will get better, I'm just kind of like stuck. What else can I kind of advise them?
So to kind of reiterate the question, she works with the advocacy group for women, and she's asking about people who are dealing with, it's an abusive situation, but it's the father. Yeah, okay. And how do you advise these girls? Because they're young and so on. You can tell them, you know, trust in Allah, but you don't know what else to say. Okay. See, as I said earlier, there's two parts to our journey. There's two parts to the believer. One is faith and one is action. There's faith and there's action. So faith is an essential part of this journey, but action is equally essential. So while we can tell each other, have faith, have trust, have tawakkul, that's only part of the equation. The other part is the work that we're doing. And that's why I want to go back and reiterate that when we have a routine each day of prayer and adhkar and, you know, tahajjud, that this action is literally changing us internally. And it strengthens us, and it really, just like with your body, right? They say you are what you eat. You are what you eat. It's the same thing spiritually. You are what you intake. And the more that you're feeding your heart with the remembrance of God, the more you remember Him, the more you do your adhkar and you read Quran, you're actually becoming stronger internally. And so for someone in that situation, number one, always try to take action to take yourself out of any abusive situation. We are not a religion of turn the other cheek. Okay? You know what that means? Turn the other cheek means if you hit me here, I turn my face so you can hit me here. Yeah? That's not our deen. Our deen is a religion of taking action against injustice and taking action to remove ourselves from situations that are unjust or oppressive. The Prophet ﷺ said, help your brother if he is the oppressor or he is oppressed. And they said, well, we know how to help him if he's oppressed. How do we help him if he's the oppressor? And he said, stop him from oppressing. So you see, he's teaching us that we're supposed to take action against oppression. He said, if you see something wrong, you should try to change it. If you see something wrong, you should try to change it with your hand. Yeah? And if you cannot, try to change it with your tongue, speaking out against it. And if you cannot, then at least hate it in your heart, and that is the weakest of faith. So what the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us is that faith, iman, is linked to taking action against injustice. That's deep. Because so many of us have heard this narrative of have sabr. You feel me? This is false. This is a false concept of sabr. That have sabr doesn't mean that you allow yourself to be oppressed. Have sabr doesn't mean, having patience doesn't mean that you allow yourself to be mistreated or that you allow yourself to be oppressed. We are not a religion of being weak. We're not a religion of being passive. We're not a religion of allowing or enabling oppression. We are not. That's not our deen. In fact, our deen teaches us to do the opposite, to fight against it and to try to change it. That's part of iman. That's part of iman. So anyone who says that having patience means being passive, turning your face, or allowing for injustice to yourself or your children or your family or anybody, then that's false. That's false. That's against the words of the Prophet ﷺ, who's saying that you should help your brother by stopping him from oppressing, not enabling oppression. So I just want to really emphasize that. In a situation where you can get out of that situation, you must. You must do what you can. And if you cannot, then why I'm emphasizing these adhkar and this routine is because it fortifies you. It actually strengthens you internally. And you know this book, Fortress of a Muslim? Do you know why it's called Fortress of a Muslim? It's one of the collections of adhkar, of supplications. You know why it's called Fortress of a Muslim? Because it literally creates a fortress around the believer, around the heart, and around you in order to protect you. So if you can't get out of a toxic situation physically, it creates like a buffer. It creates a barrier to help protect you. Like imagine a person has to work around a nuclear plant. A nuclear plant. Well, obviously you try to avoid nuclear radiation, right? But if you cannot and you have to be around nuclear radiation, what do? You fortify yourself. And that's what the adhkar does. So that's my advice. Okay. Are we taking more or one more? Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you so much for your talk today. You spoke about tying your camel and how Musa alayhi salam took the means. And my question is, to what extent do you continue taking the means before realizing that the door you're knocking on is actually supposed to be closed?
Ah, beautiful question. Beautiful question. Story of my life. Yeah, I can't tell you how many slam shut doors I've just kept. But you know what? Guess what? What I've learned, number one, istikhara is such a blessing, and we don't use it enough. We only use it the night before our wedding, and that's just not. It's too late at that point, guys. Like, I'm an advocate of istikhara day zero, you know? I'm serious. Why are we waiting? It's the weirdest, we have the weirdest relationship with istikhara. I'm just saying. We have the weirdest relationship with something that was given to us as a gift. It's a gift, but we have this very strange kind of, almost like a fear. Some of us are scared of istikhara. Oh, we're scared. Admit it. You know why we're scared? I'll tell you why we're scared. This is why we're scared. Because we decide, just like a little kid, you know, I want that knife. Yeah? And we're just terrified that something's gonna take it away. So we're just like, no, I'm scared of istikhara. I might not get what I want. It's the weirdest logic. Because all istikhara is saying is, if this is good for me, then give it to me, make it easy and make it blessed. Anybody want anything different than that? And if this is not good for me, it's like we're saying, if it's not good for me, give it to me anyway. Right? We're so funny. We're just really, when we behave with Allah like children. Like, you know the kid who wants the knife no matter what because they saw you holding it? Like, no, I want that knife. No, but it's gonna hurt you. No, I want that knife. So sometimes we're like, no, I want it whether it's good for me or not good for me. If it's good for me, give it to me. If it's not good for me, give it to me. You know? But istikhara is saying, if this is not good for me, then take it away. You know? Istikhara says, وَإِن كُنْتَ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ هَذَا الْأَمْرَ شَرٌّ لِي. It's bad for me. فِي دِينِي وَمَعَاشِي وَعَاقِبَةِ أَمْرِي. فَاصْرِفْهُ عَنِّي. Then take it away from me. وَاصْرِفْنِي عَنْهُ. And take me away from it. وَاقْدُرْ لِي الْخَيْرَ حَيْثُ كَانَ ثُمَّ ارْضِنِي بِهِ. And then bring me what is good for me, whatever it may be, and make me pleased with it. Istikhara is perfect. It's such a perfect dua. Because you're asking for whatever is good for you, bring it, make it easy, make it blessed. Whatever is not, take it away, take you away from it, and bring you what's good for you, and make you happy with it. So now you're praying istikhara. Guys, pray it from day zero, okay? Pray istikhara from the beginning and throughout. And not only for marriage, for your job, for your choices, for your career. Pray istikhara. We're not using this tool enough. That this gift that Allah gave us, it's asking Allah to take steering wheel. That's what it is. Some of us think it means like, oh my God, I'm looking for a sign, right? And of course we're going to see the sign how we want to see the sign, right? You want to marry someone named, Paul, so you see like light in the sky and you think, oh my God, oh wait, it started raining, and rain is related to R, which is kind of close to P in the alphabet. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like mental gymnastics, because you're just, it's not, okay. Nowhere in the dua of istikhara does it ask for a sign. Nowhere in the dua of istikhara does it ask for a dream. Actually, if you study, just read the meaning of istikhara, you are simply asking Allah, take the steering wheel. You're asking Allah, as one person once said, it's like, yeah, Allah, I am idiot. So, this one shit is so funny. It's like, ya Allah, I am idiot. So you take, it's like, essentially that's what you're saying. Because you're saying, you know and I don't know. You see and I don't see. Allah, I'm idiot. So think of it like, it's like, so therefore, ya Allah, take it over. If it's good for me, do it. If it's not good for me, take it away. Nobody wants anything but that. Is there anyone in the world who wants something bad? Raise your hand if you want something bad. Exactly. No one's raising their hand. Nobody wants bad, yeah? But we just have to be wise. So when you're banging on a slam shut door, okay, knock, but pray istikhara and realize Allah answers our istikhara in what happens, in what is happening. Is that door opening or is it staying shut? Or is actually something that was open starting to close? You understand? And this is how Allah answers our istikhara. He will open some things or He will close some things. And we have to be willing to understand and willing to accept. So it's okay to take action towards a certain outcome, but be praying istikhara, at the same time and putting your trust in Allah, and be willing to accept that this is the answer to my istikhara, and qadda Allahu ma sha'a fa'al. That whatever Allah wills, and He does whatever He wills, and whatever He does is the best. So Allah Ta'ala alam, aquli qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum, innahu ghafurur rahim.